have you ever had that opportunity? This happens in so many ways. Even, Bible class, for example. I'm just thinking this. Like you have a comment that you think, I think this will be helpful. I think it'll be beneficial. You know that others may even like it, and maybe they'll say, hey, good comment or something like that. And then that begins to bug you, and so you don't comment. You had an opportunity to do something good for someone, but you knew that the nature of this one, it'll be seen. And you think, I don't know if I should do that. Seen or unseen is the question before us. Because you come to a passage like Matthew chapter 6, for example, and you have Jesus teaching, beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be them, for then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. And you're thinking about that passage, and very quickly, and what you're getting from that is, shh, be quiet. I've been wanting to preach on this for a few weeks, just finally getting around to it. Hope this is going to be of some benefit to you. Want to discuss what Jesus is talking about so that we know how to navigate life. Because us shining as lights in the world is a pretty big thing to Jesus. Matter of fact, if you allow me for just a moment, I was thinking about how foundational, Jordan and I were talking about the Sermon on the Mount. You have a lot of incredibly smart people in the world, and they can read something like the Sermon on the Mount, and they just shrug it off. Like that's good for a sixth grader. But then as life goes on, you realize how foundation these truths are. And I'm thinking, if the intelligent being who came in our form talked about this on the Sermon on the Mount, this is a foundational truth. What it tells me is this stuff is pretty important. Would you agree on that? Pretty important, what he has to say. But this is part of that Sermon on the Mount. What Jesus will do is he's going to give 3 examples. I do not believe that he has an exhausted list, but he's making a point, practices that they would have among this Jewish audience. And what he's going to talk about is their prayer. Well, first their giving, their prayer, and fasting. So we follow along in the text. He continues on. He says, thus when you give to the needy, so there's the topic. He's talking about giving. And now he's going to talk about being, not being like the hypocrites. You'll see a common pattern between these 3 examples. So when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. Okay, so beware of being like them. And that's what's going on. They're wanting to be praised by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. And then he moves on. And when you pray, same pattern. You must not be like the hypocrites, right? They love to stand and pray in the synagogues and at the street corners, that they may be seen by others. Okay? That's their motivation. Here's the consequence. They've received their reward from mankind, but you, whenever you pray, go to your closet, right? Go into your room, shut the door, pray to your Father who is in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. And then finally, he has a little bit more on prayer, but he goes back to this principle and he ends it with fasting. 3rd topic. So, when you fast, don't look gloomy like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces, that their fasting may be seen by others. I've highlighted this. You see the common denominator in all this? Okay, you know this. So they've received their reward. Here's what I want you to do. When you fast, anoint your head, wash your face, so that your fasting may not be seen by others, but by your Father who's in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Now, I hope that you're already pointing out, or that it's being pointed out that you see, is Jesus taking issue that people are doing righteous things? I'm not going to answer that. Is that what Jesus has an issue with? Okay, let's talk about this text for a moment. He's warning them not to be like the hypocrites. In Jesus' ministry, you'll see this in Matthew 23. This is the last week of his earthly life. And he finally comes to head with the religious leaders. You remember Matthew 23? Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites. Jesus, on this Sermon on the Mount, says, I didn't come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. But your righteousness must exceed that of the Pharisees, these religious leaders. This is what you're used to seeing. I don't want you to follow suit. Hypocrites has that idea of play acting. And it finds its root in the Greek culture. You have plays, actors, and what would they do? They're playing a certain role, they have a mask, right? And then they play a different role, and they have a different mask. And that was known as play acting, and then they would call people like that whenever you act one way in a certain time and another way in a different context, you're a hypocrite, you're a play actor. In the Greek, you feel this very strongly, apparently. Jesus is really getting on to this play-acting mentality. He says, I don't want you to be like that. You know, thinking about that this week, there are practical issues. We're going to get to Jesus' main focus, but let me do a sidebar. Many reasons why this is an issue. First of all, what's one of the number one complaints from atheists or non-Christians against religion? They play act. So part of the problem is obvious to us. We are representing God as His children whenever we claim to do something and then do another, or whenever we're clearly, people are they're intuitive. And I hate to say it that way, but after a while you begin to pick up on something and you can tell it's going on. It's too much. Maybe is one way we'd say it. It's too much. And it's very off-putting. Well, there's also an issue within the body. People within the body are so kind and they like to think the best of one another. So sometimes they don't necessarily go there, although in the body, here's the thing, that we can see that. Sometimes we can tell whenever there's play acting going on and it's very off-putting. That, by the way, is very damaging if you have a person that's struggling in the body. When they're struggling, the last thing they need to see is play actors, right? You've understood that. Maybe that's even been you. Here's another issue within the body that can actually result in two things. Number one, it's kind of like, everyone's got a perfect life on Facebook. Well, sometimes within the body, whenever we're putting on that face, especially if you're struggling with something, you're looking at the person you're sitting next to, and just everything in their life is just great, and they're always on fire, and they've always got it together, and you're starting to feel this small. So that's not good. Another issue is that it breeds competition inside the body. You see a person that's always got it right, or is always, at the center of this thing. And now the goal changes. And you want to be known. You want to be seen. You want to be significant. Have you ever seen that in the body? Have you ever seen where people seem to just, now they're wanting to take a lead on things, or they're everything's kind of big, they're kind of wanting to be seen, and it's a combination of many things, right? And you start putting them together and it's very off-putting. By the way, wouldn't it just be refreshing if we could show ourselves and our weaknesses without trying to preserve our righteousness? We're really crafty. We find really slick ways to criticize ourselves without criticizing too harshly to where you still smell like roses. You ever done that? I have done that. You guys know, whenever we offer an invitation, we say you can come to the front. That's not like, you don't have to do that. You know that, right? That's a tradition. It's not a bad tradition. That's a tradition. But another tradition that I've noticed is sometimes, have you ever noticed whenever someone comes forward, they're like, pray for me because I got this thing going on? So wonderful that they came forward. I wonder if we're afraid because they said, because I did this, if we go, too much information. We have a tendency to try to preserve our righteousness. That's why I enjoy, even in Joel's class, people saying this is where I struggle. in the spirit of that, Jordan, right after we're done, she's like, when we're talking about unity and agreement, she's like, I think that sometimes where we struggle is that when we get in arguments, I'm okay with just not being in agreement, but you want us to be in agreement. Now, I'm smiling, but here's something. I've done that so badly that I've caused my wife to bawl at home. See, that doesn't feel funny, does it? and I wonder, we struggle with that, Now, have some wisdom. But people don't like play acting. The body doesn't like play acting. Jesus says, I won't have it. The main issue, though, is this idea of reward and glory. I want to be rewarded. And God says, but not even by me. You don't want to be rewarded by me. You want to be rewarded by your peers. The world sometimes they look at things like this and they turn our God into a petty God, this insecure God. I need all the glory. That's not our God's problem. He's not competing with you and I. There's no competition. He created us. He can snuff us out. He's not concerned about that. What the issue is that when we become such people, and here, by the way, can I say this? You can have a person that totally lives in hypocrisy. I think what communicates to most of us is that we jump into this role sometimes and we got to jump out of it. Does that communicate more? Like, I would hope I'm not living in hypocrisy, but I've been guilty of this stuff. You know what I mean? And so you find yourself wanting this reward and this recognition, and then you got to keep going back to this stuff. No, that's not what it's about. Because the problem is that if we find ourselves trapped in that, we are essentially saying that I deserve glory. And it is in that context that we need to be reminded of something. We are not even in the arena with God. You know what Jesus said? I'll put it this way. Let me give you a way to look at Romans chapter 6. Jesus, through Paul, says it this way. I want you to take everything that you could do, your performance, and I want you to kill it because it's not deserving of life. Oh, and by the way, after you kill it, this horrible performance of yours, commit to continue to kill it because you sneaky people are going to keep trying to get your glory in your way, and it's good for nothing. Keep killing it and learn to be like me. That's how good we are. Now, let me say something. Let me balance this puppy out because that sounds like a bummer, but let's talk about this for a moment. Here's a reality. Every ability and every single one of us here has an ability from God. Every single one of us has been given a talent. And with that talent comes responsibility. Would you agree with that? Okay. But even so, as Paul would say, for by the grace given to me, I say to everyone among you not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think with sober judgment, each according to the measure of faith that who has assigned? That ability was given by God. Okay? Here's what we're not saying. Because I'm afraid that sometimes when we talk faith and we talk God's word, we can lose common sense. That's right. Everyone's worthless and no one does anything good. Well, everyone has fallen short, that's for sure. And everyone has to be committed because we're always trying to be like Jesus. But here's the thing. We were all created equal, but we don't all act equal. Yeah, we do. We don't. we don't. For example, what was the point of bringing up Noah, Daniel, and Job? Ezekiel, and the word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, when a land sins against me by acting faithlessly, and I stretch out my hand against it and break its supply of bread and send famine upon it, and cut off from it man and beast, even if these three men, Noah, Daniel, and Job, were in it, they would deliver but their own lives by their righteousness, declares the Lord God. Now, again, the point is, it's a rebuke. You guys are so self-centered and so self-righteous that even if Noah, Daniel, and Job were in it, you wouldn't help them and save them, but you'd save them yourselves by your own righteousness. But what's implied in that? Even Noah, Daniel, and Job, what he's saying is these stand out people. And so what we're not saying is that whenever God looks at us, he can't realize, hey, there are some people that quite frankly just show more faith in me than someone else. But what we're all saying is that we've all fallen short. And that glory is not due us. That's a reality. I was actually laughing about this Ecclesiastes. The teacher says, surely there is not a righteous man on earth who does good and never sins. And I had to add these two because this one hurt. He says, do not take to heart all the things that people say lest you hear your servant cursing you. Number one, he's saying, don't be overly concerned about what people think or what they're saying about you. Because here's the thing, you go inquiring, you're going to find out that they're bad-mouthing you. But he doesn't just stop that. He says, your heart knows that many times you yourself have cursed others. Oh. James put it, now the context is the teacher and watching of the tongue, but he just puts it this way, for we all stumble in many ways. Have you ever thought about that? Like, I can't believe your God sent you to hell for doing one sin. First of all, I didn't do just one sin. Let's just get that one out of the way. I appreciate your kindness, but let's get real for a moment, okay? So, brethren, if I may, hold on. But then earlier in this Sermon on the Mount, before Jesus said that, he said this. He had the Beatitudes, and then he gets straight into this. You know, you're the salt, and then you're the light. You're the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. And the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. Okay? You're the light of the world. Beautiful passage, powerful passage. There is no, and you've probably already figured this out, there is no contradiction in Matthew chapter 5 and Matthew chapter 6. What was Jesus' issue in Matthew 6 about the giving, the prayer, the fasting? He did not have a problem that a person prayed in front of other people. He didn't have a problem with the fact that someone gave him, maybe someone else knew that you gave. He didn't have a problem with the fact that you could fast and someone happens to know you're fasting. He has a problem that you did it with a motive to be seen by others to receive praise and glory. That was his issue. Are we clear on that? So brother or sister, and let me also say this, I'm going to assume that for all of us who sometimes struggle to have that limelight, right? Can we say, I've struggled with that? Have you struggled with that? And I've done it in really crafty, secret ways. What I'm saying is, let's be patient with each other, right? We're working to work that out in our hearts, okay? Let's be mindful of it. If you're looking to do something good, God-like, you just need to ask yourself this question. What's my motive? If your motive is to be seen, I would encourage you, like I would encourage myself, you need to hold on. But if your motive is to do it for the glory of God and to be helpful, and that's okay that even people will appreciate it. You know, that's okay. Don't be weird about this thing. It's okay to know that people will appreciate that. But if your motive is good, then get on with it and don't be stressing about the rest, what other people may do with it. That's not on your plate. Amen? Okay, but here we are. There's no contradiction. Here's some questions. What's the significance of chapter 5, 14 through 16? Well, we're shining as lights in the world. Question, not about us. Who is a light supposed to help? I know that I do this. I go back to these really simple texts and I try to think about it this way. Don't overlook the obvious. The light isn't supposed to help you. A city set on a hill are for all these other people trying to find the place to go. It's for all the other people. When you light it and you put it in the house, I put the light in the house for me. He says it gives light to all. The light is not about us, it's about others. In Matthew chapter 25, whenever Jesus gives this final judgment scene, right? And he's dividing the sheep from the goats. And he's going to accept the sheep. And he says, you know, I was hungry and you fed me. I was naked, you clothed me. I was thirsty, you gave me water to drink. You visited me whenever I needed a visit in prison. And these righteous sheep, these humble sheep, say, Lord, when do I don't even know when I got to be honest with you. I don't remember doing that for you. And Jesus said, no, whenever you did it to the least of these my brothers, you did it to me. And then you have that other group that Jesus is saying, you're out. He's like, because whenever I was naked, you didn't clothe me. Hungry, you didn't feed me. Thirsty, you didn't give me something to drink. And they say, well, when did we see you? You're saying we didn't do that to you. We didn't see you. Whenever you didn't do it to the least of these my brothers, you didn't do it to me. And I was in the spirit of giving credit where credit's due. I'd been talking to Billy this week, and he had referenced this passage, so I'm still in material. I know you're paying me to preach, so maybe throw him a couple dollars. But he was just pointing out that, isn't it funny how the humble are basically almost talking their way out of reward while Jesus is having to put them in, and the prideful are trying to talk their way, and Jesus is putting them out. And he had just made the point. He says, when I think about humility, I don't think about it in the sense of God says, hey, you're prideful, Billy, be humble. You're prideful, so don't be prideful. He said, to me, the point is that pride gets in the way of transformation. Pride gets in the way of change. So God's got to get pride out of the way so he can change you. If you're not humble, you do you. The whole picture, the whole point of this is that we get ourselves out of the way so that God can get the glory. I already said we're representing him. Would you agree this is not a have to, but a get to kind of life? These flawed people, God says, I still love you in that flawed state, and I'm working with you. And he doesn't say, whenever you get it all figured out, then I'll put you to work. He says, and even in this state, I want you to shine. Peter said, keep your conduct among the Gentiles honorable, so that when they speak against you as evildoers, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day of visitation. He says, eventually you keep doing what you're supposed to be doing, and God will be glorified. Jesus says, by this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit, and so prove to be my disciples. John 15, Jesus says, I am the vine, you are the branches. As far as you can't do anything without the vine. You can't bear anything. But when you're in the vine, you get to bear fruit for. And I say this is a wonderful blessing because you know what happened whenever the light came into our lives, didn't you? Think about it in that sense. Whenever Jesus came into your life, what did that do for you? He's called you to play a role in that. I don't know about you, but that's kind of exciting. That's very humbling. But let's not forget, where did this light come from? I love this. You're the light of the world. What a gracious thing to say to us. You are the light of the world. And how he said it too. You could be, Justin, you could be the light of the world one day. Jesus didn't say that. He says, you're the light of the world. But then you go to John chapter 1. You go to John 1. And here's the beginning of this letter. I'm going to read this with you. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life, listen to this, was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Jesus Christ gave us life. And John says, and that life is actually the light coming from God. And Jesus says, you're the light of the world. He goes on, he says, there was a man sent from God whose name was John. This is John the Apostle, now referencing John the Baptist. He came as a witness to bear witness about the light, that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but came to bear witness about the light. And that's one of the greatest things, because if, as a student of John, you know, as you start getting into this, what was the Baptist continually telling people? It's not me, it's him. The true light, which gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. And you know who he's talking about. And then Jesus came into our world, and he forever changed everything. Jesus came into our lives. Jesus does so many wonderful things for us. Amen? In so many ways. I had one of these kind of putting all the cards, gut-wrenching conversations with one of you this week. Very blessed to have it. This world can be dark. I mean, we're lights in a dark world. And there's so many things that we want God to address in our lives. And let me just say that there's nothing wrong with that. And so we call on him to help. It could be turmoil, trials, tribulations, health, whatever it is. We want him to do something. And this individual was saying, sometimes it's hard because you're reading through the gospel accounts and you're looking at all these glorious things that he does, but he's got all these miracles. And sometimes you just want him to perform a miracle for you. Anyone know what that feels like? And coincidentally, I was just kind of going through Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and I was looking at all the good things that Jesus did, and I got to be fair to this person. I was just reminded again, he's like performing miracle after miracle after miracle after miracle. And we're looking today, and we're like, well, what is he doing? Because he's not necessarily doing all these miracles again. That's why I love my brethren, because of their tenacious spirit of serving God in the good and the bad, whether things go the way we want them to or not, when we want them to or not, we stay faithful to God. But I did want to share with you one thing, and this isn't a miracle, but I think it's just as beautiful, if not more beautiful. And this is Matthew chapter 9. I can't relate to miracles being performed in that sense, but I feel like I can a little bit more closely relate to Matthew 9. Jesus, again, had been teaching by the sea. He's very popular, people coming to him. Verse 9, as Jesus passed on from there, he saw a man called Matthew sitting at the tax booth, and he said to him, "Follow me." And he rose and followed him. First of all, can you see it? All these people and all this stuff going on, and Jesus is walking by, and then he sees Matthew, and there's just Matthew. Matthew's got his own problems. Jewish people don't care about Matthew. Jesus stops and he sees him and he says, "Follow me." And as Jesus reclined at table, he doesn't just do that. It gets better. And as Jesus reclined at table in the house, behold, many tax collectors and sinners came and were reclining with Jesus and his disciples. He's reclining with Matthew. He's eating with Matthew. He stops his busy schedule and dines with Matthew. And when the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" But when he heard it, he said, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. For I came not to call the righteous, but sinners." One of the things that we love about Jesus and why we're so privileged to be called into this light is because Jesus came into the world not just to receive just praise and honor all the time, but he came in to help a dying people. And we've all been Matthew. And Jesus has stopped and he's seen you and he said, "Follow me." And then he brought us into a relationship with him. And he dines, if you will, with us. And then he goes to bat. He goes to bat for us. I love that about Jesus. He came in, he says, "You know what? I've seen what you've offered. I'm really looking for people that are merciful. I'm really looking for people that have that same goal in mind as me. And so I'll say it one last time, and I appreciate so much your attention. It is such a privilege for Jesus to say, you are the light of the world. So this week, we get to be the light of the world. We get to be many, many sons, where we strip our pride and our ego, and we're about other people and helping them, because hopefully, Lord willing, they see Jesus in what we're doing, and at the end of the day, we're with Him. I don't know of any better calling. Hope this has been an encouragement.